How's it going? My name's Ignacio. I wanted to talk a little bit about trying to overcome, addiction and alcohol and, going from woman to woman and all that. I haven't really defeated withdrawals with like drugs and alcohol. I'm still like working on myself on those things. When it comes down to women, I've been doing pretty good where I'm not out there like all googly eyed and all that, looking around and trying to do all that or going out all the time. And some of the things that I did to be able to try to overcome that, you know, I started off small. I try to find something that was worth battling this for, like inside of my prayer and in my understanding of what God would want from me. And you can't just overcome it just thinking that it's going to happen one day to the next. You're going to beat yourself up doing that. You're going to really hurt yourself, putting a standard up way too high. Don't put the bar up high on yourself. You know what I mean? Like, give yourself some time. We have all of our life to be able to work on these things. And, me, I go from doing this from a young age all the way up to, well, I'm 33 now, like I said, I've been in and out of jail, and I'm still trying to overcome these things. And for a lot of people that don't understand what it's like to have to battle withdrawals or have a real bad alcoholism, it's not easy for them to understand people like us. You know what I mean? But I'm pretty sure they know some people that are just like us within their family or their friends or whoever it may be, Um, someone like me, I looked up to a lot of people that said, you know what, I'm quitting alcohol. It's already been like so and so long. Out here like a couple of months, or I've been battling it for like a year, 2 years. And I always look up to stuff like that. Even when I was a big alcoholic or doing a lot of drugs, I used to always picture myself like, what would I be like if I wasn't all full of drugs all the time? And especially when I was younger, thinking about those things, I really started thinking about my life and how it could be. And when you think about life and what it could be without the drugs, you're not looking at like, oh, I'm just gonna be this superhero flying around doing all it's, you know what I mean? When you think about reality of it, it's just a cleaner version of yourself, one where your mind isn't distorted from a lot of things, or your reliance isn't on something to pull you out of a depression or to make you have a good time. You know what I mean? In reality, that's what it really is about when you're trying to quit these things. Because drugs, they can kill you. If you got kids, they're not going to be able to see the real you because you're always there drugged out or too drunk. One of the problems that I have as an alcoholic is I don't know how to stop. I'll get one in, it'll be two, it'll be 7, 8, 9 after that, and before you know it, I'm there blacked out, or they're drunk, just all knocked out and sleeping, waking up, regretting what I did, And I fell down into a part of my life where I lost everything because of drinking, and I could have still been the person that I wanted to be protesting, but I allowed drinking to be the thing that just made me get more aggressive. And it wasn't a good thing. I feel like I could have still accomplished a lot more if I wasn't just drinking all the time and losing my sense on things, and it got real bad. And like I said, when it comes down to trying to work on these things, you have to set a reasonable standard on yourself, a reasonable bar. and then just make little increments as you're going. You know what I mean? You don't want to get to the point where you set it too high that you're just like, fuck this. You get frustrated. You just end up going off, and it becomes real bad after that. And you got to set more reasonable bars for yourself. And when that starts to happen, you can start seeing a little bit of progress where you can start feeling a lot better about yourself instead of feeling like it's impossible. You can't just go cold turkey on things, in other words. That's one of the hardest things to do, going cold turkey on stuff. And when I was out there going from woman to woman, it was usually because I was out drinking and doing drugs and shit, and I just end up going out and doing whatever I wanted, and every time that me and my woman had a problem, break up, make up, I get depressed, I take off, I try to look for love somewhere else, and it becomes difficult like that. I was a guy that you catch out there at the clubs all the time, or catch them at a bar. Whether I went by myself or I went with one of my friends, friend like family, feel like a cousin to me. And one of the things that I had to do was really work on myself. You know what I mean? Like, when I told myself, I need to work on this, I had to get anybody off board that just wasn't gonna allow me to accomplish that. I could send out messages, be cool still from a distance, you know what I mean? But I didn't want to jeopardize what I was trying to do for myself. And I know how I get. A lot of you out there, you might be like me, you got that one wingman where it's just like you click, you guys just always have a good time, people feel the energy, and the women just get attracted to it. And everybody doesn't, when you have that one wingman, not everybody's just that one wingman, you know what I mean? And you know what I mean, you know what I'm talking about if you're in that situation, you know what I mean? And, even by myself, I could do that, but, as far as bringing like a bigger energy of a good time and fun and just talking, laughing and shit like that, it's much different than that one guy that's just like, hey, bro, like, what about your girl? Like, somebody that reminds you, you know what I mean? That's the kind of person you need around you if you're trying to, stay away from just going from woman to woman. You need somebody that's going to remind you about stuff like that. Somebody in a long-term relationship and, stuff like that, because it reminds you about what you're really doing this all for. One of the things that we go through, even as believers of God, when you go out there real good with your words and, you're able to pick up women and all that, that's something that God really doesn't want of you. You know what I mean? If you're going to marry them, then fine. You know what I mean? If you're going to take them serious and you get married with them and so on, then fine. You know what I mean? There was polygamy inside of the Bible, but they took care of their wives. You know what I mean? Like, that's what the whole point of doing this for is marriage, a commitment, a true connection and relationship with that person. But if you're just going out there just to go have sex and just do whatever you want, like, that's where you already went wrong. You know what I mean? That's where it goes wrong. But when you got somebody that's willing to tell you, hey, you're fucking up, that's someone that you need around you. You know what I mean? When somebody cares enough to tell you you're fucking up, that's kind of what you need. It can't just be by yourself. Like, if somebody could tell you you're fucking up, but if you're not ready to put all that shit down, it's just words in one ear and out the other. You know what I mean? But when you, like me, I got into the age where I just want to settle down. I want to be a part of my kid's life. I want to know what it's like to experience long love, and I don't want to have this punishment that I deserve, where I'm in and out of things that I can't feel for, or relationships that just crack, whether you wanted it or not, and it falls apart. Because, you know, when you go to God, He may forgive your sins, but it doesn't mean that you don't deserve a punishment. You know, a lot of times we think that everything just goes away and we don't have to go through anything, but we go through a lot of things in life because of the way we treat others. You know what I mean? That's why we get that same energy reciprocated back to us, because it's what we deserve. And if God loves us, He loves them as well. The ones that we hurt, or the ones we're just out there having sex with. And you might not see it, but behind closed doors, they could have been like, damn, I really wanted that one. You know, I wanted to settle down. Damn, you know, why did I just have sex with him? He's just using me. And you know what I mean? Like, you leave that energy out there. You leave a woman sitting out there praying, and God's got to figure it out for him, for her, and for you. You know what I mean? Like, and for Him to do that is just out of love. And if it's a punishment that's going to happen in your life for you to want to ground yourself and cement yourself into something more righteous, you know what I mean? Like, by all means, He's going to do it. And so, you know, when I was going from woman to woman, you know, I started catching myself realizing, you know, that it was wrong over time. It's a lot of memories that I carry, you know what I mean? And I still think back, like, I hope that they're doing all right. But one of the things that when I felt, you know, convicted in what I was doing, I looked at my woman that I want to be with, and I said, you know what? If there's any way that I can give back to those other women, I hope that they can find a man that's really trying to plant himself in the relationship he's trying to take serious. You know what I mean? And so I want to be able to try to reciprocate that energy back out into life. Like, you know what? I want to try. I want to make this thing work. I don't want to just give up and be out there doing whatever, you know what I mean? And that's one of the things that made me stand more firm in wanting to make my relationship work, give back for what I did, you know. And, you know, when you get to that point in your life where, you know, like my grandparents, you know, my grandparents were married for 60 years. And then, you know, my daddy, he got married, you know, and then I have my brother. And from his side of the family, my grandparents were married for 55 years. And, you know, both relationships completely different, but nothing but love in the end, right? You know, my grandpa was more of a drinker from my brother's side, and, you know, he was just more of like, you know, more of that party going kind of guy. He'd just say whatever came to mind and stuff like that. And then I had my grandpa that, you know, he was more of the quiet kind of guy. He was more of the, you know, be there for his wife, and, you know, he had more patience. And, you know, when I looked at both my grandparents, I saw one where the bar was like really up there, you know what I mean? And then I had my other grandpa where, you know, the bar was more reasonable for where I was at in my life because of the kind of person that I was, you know what I mean? Outgoing, partying, going out, doing whatever, talking however, and, you know. And both of them came from the Navy. And like I said, they just both had different backgrounds and different ways to handling their relationship. And, you know, I caught myself talking with my brother's side of the family, my grandparents from that side, a lot about a lot of the things that I was going through because I felt like he could relate. You know, it was something that I was able to talk with. I no longer have them in my life. They passed away. May God rest their soul, and thank you for taking care of them, Father God. And, you know, I have my grandpa from my side, but my grandma, she had passed. And same, may God keep her soul, and thank you for taking care of her and loving her. And, you know, I have this thing where, you know, it was a lot harder to ask or, you know, some questions and try to figure things out because I knew that I wasn't quite there, you know. I know that I wanted to work on myself and be at that bar one day, you know what I mean? I wanted to be exactly where he was at, patience, loving, kind, and, always there to be able to, have a different direction about things when it came down to patience. My other grandpa, he was very loving for her, but like I said, he spoke his mind more, and he would drink like how I would, and he was like more of a heavy drinker like I was, and and like I said, it was just an area that I felt more comfortable be able to talk about things. And when you look at stuff like that, whether you have it or not in your life, maybe you might have like a homeboy that's like family, and you see that in somebody. It isn't something that's supposed to get us upset, but it's supposed to be something to inspire us. Ask questions. How did you get there? How hard was it? What were the hardships and stuff like that? You know what I mean? And like it starts to make you feel like it's possible. They tell you about their mistakes. You start to feel a little bit more comfortable about making your own. And that's why it's good to talk with people like that, because like you'll see a lot of long-term relationships, but they'll tell you it wasn't easy. They'll tell you that they had hardships. They tell you a lot of those things, and that's the affirmation that you need to hear sometimes, because then you know that you can do it. It becomes more possible to you, more tangible as an opportunity to be seized. And when it came down to my drugs, I got into a lot of drugs. A lot of the drugs that I did, I wouldn't really tell a lot of my family until they found out on their own, and it wasn't that easy. That drugs is really hard to get over, especially when you're always having a good time. You go out and all that shit, or after a while you try hiding it because you don't want people to know, and after that you get so good at hiding it that you forget that it's something you need to work on. And it's a tough task. For those of you that are trying to quit, may God bless you with more strength. May you inspire others to be in the same position. For the others that talk about it, about how people see them, they know that they were battling drugs, and to see that they quit, I can't wait till I'm at that point, inspiring the next generation of people that are trying to quit as well. It's not an easy walk. It's very difficult. There's people that, I did drugs. Oh yeah, well, I did it once. I quit. I mean, why can't you quit? It's like, I've been doing this for years. It's called a habit. That one time that you did it, so that way you could say you did it, that shit don't count. I don't look at like doing drugs once, like if you did drugs at all. You know what I mean? Like doing drugs is like an accumulation of time where you got like 1% of your life in it. You know what I mean? But if you're like, I did it, like just and then threw it out, nah. Whether it be like meth, coke, crack, whatever, I did it one time and that was it. I got over it. No, you didn't do drugs. You didn't do drugs. What you did was try to make a point for yourself. That way you could tell others that you did it. You didn't really do drugs. For the rest of us that actually do drugs because, our situation, depression, or, you was just trying to have a good time growing up and it got stuck on you. You know what I mean? You was doing it for a long period of time. That's drugs. You know what I mean? Like, for us, it's not an easy task to get over. You start to have those withdrawals. You go to a place where you can remember it, and you don't even have to do the drugs sometimes. Sometimes you pop your back and you're like, oh, you just had that feeling, you know what I mean? And sometimes you'll have those dreams, you wake up and you're like, damn, I had a dream you was doing drugs, and you wake up and you're like, damn, I start craving it and shit. Sometimes you'll be sitting there and you'll have a conversation and you'll start to remember those memories, and then you start to crave it, you know what I mean? And you'll start talking to people, you know people, and you're around them, and you're like, damn, you got a battle just not wanting to grab at it and shit, and, or, you know, do a line or something. Like, those are real battles, you know what I mean? That's not something to get over, you know what I mean? It's like those people that say, oh, I did drugs once. It's like, all right, let me challenge you. Go 2 years without doing anything with your wife. Do 2 years the opposite of what you used to do. Like, you like to play sports, you love to play sports, you do that shit like all your life, stop. 2 years, don't even do that shit. Just stop. And sooner or later you're gonna be like, well, I'm bored, I don't wanna. You're gonna understand what it's like. You know what I mean? But that one time that you did it, that don't mean shit. Out of all honesty, don't even tell people you did drugs if it was just one time. Oh, I quit drugs, why can't you? Like, don't even say shit. You steal a lot of hope from people, you know what I mean? Because then they think that you were actually like, when they hear, oh, I do drugs, they think that they try to relate to you. They see themselves in you. I quit. Well, how'd you do it? Well, I just got over it. And then you find out they only did it once, twice. Nothing big. Like, when you realize that people really do see themselves, and they're the people that really do look for assistance, you know what I mean? Like, you take away a lot from them. But if you're like somebody that like needed rehab and shit like that, like, you know, a lot of people don't like to go to rehab. I don't like to go to rehab. I'm really trying to figure this out of myself. And like, no diss to those that go to rehab. Like, I really do hope that you battle this and you break through it, because, you know, it is a tough thing. And the main thing that I don't want is for it to control my life like it's been, you know. It made me do a lot of stuff that, you know, what seemed like a good time, now that I'm older, it looks like a waste of time. A waste of a lot of things that I could have accomplished for myself. Took away a lot of opportunities as well. And, you know, I feel like if I could have cleaned myself up, you know, I'd be a lot happier about myself right now, you know. And like I said, when you're trying to quit drugs, you're not here to think like, oh, I'm gonna just be rich from this shit. Like, yeah, no, that's not the mindset that you should have, because as soon as you're not rich, you're gonna fall down into the worst addictions again. My mindset is just mainly wanting to know who I could be, not controlled by drugs. The kind of parent that I could be, the kind of husband that I could be, the kind of kid to my parents that I could be. You know, I argue a lot with my mom's, and she's done so much for me in my life. You know, my mom, she's done a lot for me, you know. She took care of me. She got me out of jail a lot. She got me my car. She was doing all this, but I don't know why I had this sense of myself that I would argue with her for just, I don't know why. And then I get into my depression from the, you know, the downers and shit, and I pull myself a lot further. I take myself away from, you know, my family, and not wanting to be around, and, you know what I mean, like, and just wanting to be around other people that just do drugs, and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know what I mean? Like, they're all good people, you know, like, I was able to talk with them, I had a good time with them, like, there's nothing wrong with them, except, you know, if they're controlled by drugs, then fine, you know, they probably had the same problems that I did. They probably had the same downers, and they probably had the same regrets that I did. But the only thing is, we could relate. And they weren't bad people. I didn't have to worry. I could leave my phone around. I didn't have to worry about them stealing my shit. I didn't have to worry about all those kind of things, you know what I mean? I knew that if I left it and the next day I come back, hey, you left your shit, you know? And so, like, I didn't ever have that problem of feeling like they were bad people, because I know that they weren't, you know? And one thing that I know that I just want to get over is I want to know what I'd be like sober. Like when it's finally all out of my system, when I'm not craving it, when I'm not trying to find a reason to go back out there, you know what I mean? Like, I want to know what it's like. I just don't want it to control me. You know, having to be there, hey, I got to take off, and I just jet, go over there, do my thing, wait till it wear off, come back, you know, and it's not something that I want to do. I want to be able to manage my finances better. I could have invested on myself, you know, I could have already paid off my car instead of getting my truck taken away. Like, I could have had a lot more different, you know, I could have had a house by now, you know. But I ended up resulting to what my body needed, my flesh as they call it, you know. I started looking for the desires of my flesh instead of what I needed, instead of what my future could have held, you know. If I would have took that time and started investing in like a house and all that, you know, my kid could have already had a house, didn't have to be going from like family to family. And, you know, even if I'm in that journey, there's nothing wrong. You know, my daughter gets to spend time with her family and everything, and that's a good thing. But as far as being where I want to be in life, I'm not quite there. I looked at a lot of where my finances were going as far as my drugs and my alcohol, and, you know, I'm not satisfied. I'm more angry at myself about it. When I look back at how much I spent over these years, like, I'm like, damn, that shit went fast. But when you're trying to quit, you know, you gotta, like I said, set a reasonable standard and then just slowly work your way up. Don't go cold turkey, you know. One thing that I tried doing was still being around my friends and my family and just saying no. Let that shit go in rotation. I might have taken a hit. I might have just did a little and then just sit there like, fuck, all right. And then minimize it and minimize it and minimize it until you feel no need. And, you know, I was on probation a lot of times, and so, you know, I had to figure out a way to, like, really battle these things. And, you know, it was fucking hard. I'm not gonna lie, that shit is hard. It is hard. I got into heavier smoking of cigarettes. When is this shit gonna stop? You know what I mean? Like, fucking up my lungs, can't even play sports no more, running around with my daughter and shit. I'm like all out of breath and shit. And, you know, I don't want to live like that, you know? I don't want to live like that. I want to be able to keep up with my grandkids, you know what I mean? I don't want to be older and like, all right, that's it. You guys go do your own thing. I want to be there, you know. Later on down the road, I want to have more kids, you know. I want to have that. But I want to see a better version of myself before that. You know, my daughter, she had to grow up seeing me a heavy drinker, you know. I'm not happy about that. I didn't really think that I would come down to that. You know, that shit hurt. You know, after I wanted to stop drinking and I started sobering up, one of the things that I was doing was, you know, the first thing was my daughter had to tell me that she didn't like to see me drinking, that it scared her. She said, Daddy, you know, I'm scared. What if something happens to you? That shit hit me fucking disgusting. I had talked with this man, and, you know, it made me feel a lot better when he said, you know, you gotta find a different version of yourself if you're trying to stop. Get into a different habit. Find yourself in a different habit. What's something that you don't usually do? I told him I usually don't write. You know, I do music, you know what I mean? I like to freestyle just to let out whatever I got going on, but not like professionally or nothing like that. It's just more, you know, just to see what's inside and letting it out. And he's like, well, why don't you write down this? Write down what drinking did to you, who it's hurting. Write it down. Just a whole story about it. And then read it. And every time you feel like drinking, read it. And read it and read it. And when I started doing that, you know, I felt real ugly knowing that my daughter had to grow up with seeing me like that, you know. Getting locked up for this shit. And not being a part of her life for that time being, you know. And I really hated that. I really hated that about myself. And, you know, it took some time to actually want to do something about it. And like I said, I'm still battling it, you know what I mean? I still have my withdrawals, you know. I cut myself, you know, pour myself up a little bit of wine. I'll drink me a glass and I'll try to cut it off right there. Just stop. I'll put that shit away and just sit there, start writing again. And then I'll put it off to the side for a while, and then I'll go writing, and then you go to the family events, whether it be Easter or whatever, and you see them beers pop in. Feel the anxieties just start kicking in, like, wow. And it's everywhere, you know what I mean? You're always going to come across it. You go to a store, you're going to see the shit. You're going to hear stories. You're going to go to family events. You're going to see it. But the more that you're able to say, nah, I'm good, and really try to fight that shit, nah, I'm good, you know, nah. One thing that I tried doing, you know, I get my drink, hey, I'll drink this one to you. Clank their shit, and I'll just drink my soda. You know, I try to find peace in that, you know. You gotta find what works. But the main thing that worked for me was when I was writing, you know what I mean? When I was writing and reading that over and over, and then writing again and reading it over, that really did assist me in a lot. And then I started trying to write stories and just getting my mind to just going in a different place. Every time I felt like drinking, I just start writing. And before you know it, I'm like 7, 8 pages out, you know what I mean? I'm like, damn. And then I'll just keep going. I'll start craving it again. Fuck, start writing. And it's good to sing, you know, but the only thing that about singing, you get 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes in one song. And then you're like, oh. And then you know. And then you start to think that, oh, I don't sound good. I don't like the way that came out. And then you get frustrated and stuff like that. And so, like, it didn't really do too much for me when it came down to singing and freestyling. The one that really let me go off and let time pass was writing stories. I remember when this happened, just going off, just writing about any little thing, you know, just stories, you know. And that's been something that's been taking care of me on things. You know, with drugs, you know, you gotta kick one, and then congratulate yourself. We did it, man. You know, we got rid of that one. We ain't really craving that no more. We got this. We're still battling this. All right, let's work on this little by little. Slow it down. Before you know it, boom. Okay. And then you'll have those days, life will test you. Give you some bullshit. You go out, chill with your friends, and there it is again. Nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm alright. I'll drink this soda to y'all. And it's just repetition, you know what I mean? It's restarting a new habit. It's having a habit of saying no and a habit of doing something with them that isn't that. You see something going in rotation, grab your cigarette. One day I want to quit them fucking cigarettes, for real. I'd rather go back to CBD than fucking cigarettes, honestly. But, and then get rid of all that. But when it comes down to like, what's worse for you and all that, you got to narrow it down. But if you have something that isn't going to take effect on you in a negative way, or something that you don't have to feel ashamed of, it's a lot better. You know what I mean? It's a lot better for yourself. And so that's why I say, when you see something, just hit something like cigarette or your CBD, whatever, you know what I mean? And just let that all go on its own. What you don't want to find yourself into doing is when you're just at that, when you're just looking like that, one thing that I don't want to do is I don't want my daughter to think that it's okay just to let yourself go. You know what I mean? It's okay to work on yourself and have those moments, where you just relax. But I don't want her to feel like it's okay just to let everything go. You know what I mean? And that's what I want to do for myself. I want to feel like I don't have to be scared. You know what I mean? Like if I can contain myself, I could feel a lot better knowing that my daughter's got that same part of me in her that she's going to be able to contain it. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel like I can't contain this and then be worried about her when she hits those ages and she's going out and, overstepping where I need to be in her life. Over concerned to the point where it's more pushy than it is more, of how it could be. And, maybe my view is a lot different from y'all's, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that that's how it is or how it's going to be, but in my view, in my perspective, that's how I feel, And I feel like if I could show myself and my daughter can see that part of me, even if she had a husband that fell into these kind of things like me, she's going to have hope that he could also kick that shit. You know what I mean? And I just want to be able to show her that I can do it. I want to show my family that I could do it. But right now, while God's watching, I want him to be able to say, that he saw me, he was there with me every step of the way. And, at least trying is something that's worth saying in where I'm at. For the people that ain't ready, it's okay. There'll be a time for anybody and everybody where they want to. I won't ever diss anybody that isn't ready to let go of drugs yet. I don't know their situation. I don't know their life. And I was in the same position. You're in it in 1 year and out the other. And, for people like us that are trying to quit, we shouldn't down on people that haven't wanted to quit. But the minute that they want to, hey, I got you, bro. Come on, let's do this. Come on. I'm doing the same thing. We could do this. This is what I was doing. You know what I mean? And working on it together. It's not something like, oh, get away from me. You fucking don't want to quit. You're just bad for my life. You know what I mean? Like, no. I won't promote that because I know I was in the position when I didn't want to quit and I knew people that wanted to. And, I won't ever diss on that, because I was in the same position. But one thing about when somebody wants to quit, sometimes others want to do the same. And sometimes they'll be watching you from a distance. And the more successful you are, the more hope you give them. So don't give up on yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. And, don't ever give up. But that's how it was for me. I saw people that wanted to quit, and it made me want to. And now that I'm in the position where I'm trying to quit, I know that there's going to be others that are going to want to. You know what I mean? And when I finally get to say, like, I quit, like, I beat this thing, I'm not craving it like I used to. I'm not having these night sweats. I'm not having these cravings. I'm not going to diss on nobody. I just want to be able to be more informative about how I was able to defeat this. I want to be more supportive, more loving about this kind of thing. Not, oh, God's going to send you to hell because you don't know how to quit. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be that guy that says, come here. We got this. You and me. Come on. What do you need? How can we do this? Look, this is what we can do here. This is what we can do there. You know, like, my mama used to always tell me, she said, you know, you go through things in life because you're going to understand those kind of people. Don't give up on them. Because you were in that same position. But you'll inspire whatever you get out of for those that are in it. And, you know, when it's our time to inspire, it's our time to inspire. When it's our time to watch, it's our time to watch. When it's our time to feel, we'll feel, you know. But I won't ever be a person that wants to look down on any alcoholic or any drug abuser or anything, because I know what it's like. I don't want to say that God doesn't love you because you got lost. I don't want to say that. I know that He wants better for you. I know that He still protects you. But I won't ever say that He doesn't love you or He's going to throw you to hell because you have a struggle that most people can't understand. And a habit that's been for so long. I won't say that. I'll say, let's pray together. Let's do this together. Let's figure this out. Let's not give up together. You know, drinking's been real difficult. It really has. That drinking shit, that shit don't play. Because it's easy to access. You can't get jailed for it until you fuck up. The other one, you just got it on you. That's it. And even then, it's still bad for you because those downers, the depression, the effects of those hard drugs, you know. I always look at marijuana like a medicinal thing, just like they would cigarettes. But you don't want to get to a point where you have to rely on it, you know what I mean? I want to get to a point where I can have those days that I could just say, not today. And not just because I don't got the money for it. I want to be able to have a pack and just say, not today. Not tomorrow. Maybe on Monday. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want it to completely control me. I don't want to be like, oh, it's been a long day. Give me that shit. Or if it has been a long day, I would rather have it for that than just, I feel real good. I just want to do whatever. Let's just have an even better time. You know, I don't want to get to that. I want to just, you know, I want to be able to contain myself. Because if I could do that, I can inspire others to do the same. Not that everybody's got to do it like that, you know what I mean? I'm not going to tell you, oh, you better do it like this. Oh, this is the only way to do it. This is the best way. No, I want to be able to prove to myself I'm not going to let something control me. You know, even with my cigarettes, I usually have Sundays that I don't smoke. I try real hard. I put the cigarettes away. I go out throughout my day, and I try not to touch it all day. But as soon as 12 o'clock midnight hit, man, I want to work on that. Because I catch myself like that, honestly. All right, I got my day out. And then there I am. So, like, I really want to work on that, you know. That is something that I want to work on. And, you know, but I just want to be able to accomplish this. And I don't know what your goal is. I don't know what you want to get out of it. But I do hope that you accomplish it, you know. It is a good story for yourself. When you get to God in heaven, for your family, for your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids. It is a good story. Because it's always going to be around. But to give hope for those that battle the downers, the in and out of jail, the aggressiveness sometimes, that they can't control. I don't know why I get like this. I don't know why I get so frustrated. I don't know why I just don't even want to put up with my wife. I want to just go out because I'm like, I don't want to put up with this shit. Like those moments that you could just sit down and say, you know what, I was in the same position. And you know, like I said, I just don't want it to control me. That's my main objective out of this. That it doesn't control me. That I could stop for years and, you know, not let it be something that's a day-to-day thing for a long period of time. I'd rather it be like a once a year thing, or, you know what I mean? Something that just like doesn't really take a hold of me like that. And, you know, like I said, it's not an easy task, but it is totally worth it. I feel a lot better about myself that I've been working on it. You know, I do have my days, don't get me wrong. I have where I'll fall down on my own weakness. But just trying it and knowing what I could get out of it as far as my relationship with my daughter, as far as her seeing something different from me, you know, like, I feel like it's worth it, you know? And I hold on to that. And so for those of you that are out there, you know, trying to do the same, we'll get through it. Whenever it may be, forever how long it may be, but we'll get through it. You know? Just takes that time. You gotta just be willing to do it. And like I said, don't set that standard up too high, because they'll kill you. You'll be so disappointed. Oh, why the fuck couldn't I do it? Why couldn't this? Don't hurt yourself. Increments. Little by little, little by little. And then get that pause. And then if it happens again, you gotta work on it again. And then you'll get that pause. And then you work on it again and again until you get to exactly where you're trying to get. It does make us a little bit more aggressive sometimes. It does make us think further than we needed to. It makes us not have confidence with who we're with. Plays around with our minds, our self-esteem, what people might be saying or thinking about us. We take it more to heart in a negative way instead of taking it to our heart and making a positive impact on it. And, you know, but like I said, just because you do drugs or you know people that do drugs doesn't mean they're bad people. Poverty, now that's a bad motherfucker. Poverty is insane, but it does things to people. You know, it does things to people. But as far as it goes, just because you do drugs or you know people that do drugs don't mean that they're bad people. They got something inside that they don't want to talk about. And it's just something that works for them. And, you know, some people take Tylenol for their headaches. Those people rely, like us, we rely on it for what we're feeling. Just a medicine we've been staying on for too long. So try not to look at them so negatively. Don't be upset with them. Don't hate them, you know. Pray for them, if anything. Pray for us. We could really use it, you know. And for those of you that do pray for people like us, thank you. For real, thank you. For those of you that keep patience with people like us, thank you. You know, I know sometimes it might be hard to deal with, but thank you. And, you know, it's just an ongoing life lesson that we all go through in life, you know. Some of them more than others. Some of them that don't, you know, haven't ever tried it. That's good for you, you know. But don't go downing on somebody that does and think you're better than them because of that. You know? Especially if if you say you got God in your life, you gotta have more love than that. You gotta pray harder for people like that. But thank you all for listening and everything. I appreciate y'all, and I hope that y'all battle through this. We're gonna get through this together. I'll be getting on here and uploading so that way you can see how I've been doing on it. And I love to talk about God, so you know what I mean. This is just a part of intervention. We're all God's children. This is just a part between people like me, someone like you, brother, or someone like you, sister. And if you're somebody that doesn't do drugs, so you can understand people like us and what we got to battle through. And as God's children, we got to be there for each other. We got to love one another, inspire the next, give hope to the others. So, may God bless us all.